Welcome back to another mini episode of my wonderful podcast that you're listening to. Your Authentic Man podcast. I'm David Chambers, your host. I'm a men's dating, relationship and intimacy coach. I've spent, over 10 years working with men in the area of love and connection and intimacy and sex and all these sorts of things. And, if you're new to this podcast, there's probably almost 300 other episodes you can go and check out. But I'm going to talk about something that's come up a few times in my client work, my day-to-day work I do with men one-to-one and in the groups I run. And it's this thing about sexual performance anxiety, right? And how it stops us from enjoying sex, having good sex, connecting with our partners, having sex at all. There's a lot of men that I speak to who the anxiety gets so great that they either kind of don't date, they don't try and have sex with their partners, they don't go into relationships, they avoid even talking to women because they're worried that it's going to lead to sex, and they're worried about they can't hold the anxiety is too much for them, right? So I'm going to talk about three things: why it happens, some of the kind of expectations and myths that we have, and then steps to overcome it. So why does it happen? First of all, for stress, right? Sometimes the performance anxiety is actually about sex, right? And actually about sex. And sometimes performance anxiety is a lot about the stress that we've got in the rest of our lives. Stress accumulates in the body, right? And in the mind. So if you're feeling stressed about work, stressed about money, stressed about other things in your life, right? It could be, all manner of things, right? These days, it could be you're worried about the elections. You're worried about, being a man and all these sorts of things, right? These stresses accumulate in the body, right? And they accumulate in the mind, and they create tension in the body, in the muscles, in the fibers and so forth, right? So this can really kind of contribute to the kind of, anxiety. Sometimes there's this another point underneath this, why sexual performance anxiety happens is this unrealistic expectations coming from like porn or society or, social media we love to compare ourselves to. So that's a very common one, right? Or things we've heard, like we have these unrealistic expectations about penis size or how long we should last or what women want, what women don't want, right? What our bodies should look like and so forth. And this, again, creates the anxiety for us, right? It creates an anxiety. These stories, and I often talk about stories and narratives that we tell ourselves because it's so important, because what we tell ourselves about anything is how we experience that thing. If I really have a story in my mind that money is easy, money comes to me easily, and I have a friend of mine who literally that is how he feels about money. Money just comes to him. Like making money for him is easy. And he deeply believes it's not just what he tells himself. Like he tells himself that, and he deeply believes it. And guess what his experience is? Money just flows to him, man. People just give him money, pay him money to do stuff. And he's very affluent and does very well in business, right? So these stories we tell ourselves are really powerful, and they're influenced by what goes on around us. And the same happens with sex. The same happens with about our partners and pleasure and their pleasure and so forth. It's really, really powerful. So you have to be really mindful of that. I touched on this next point that creates anxiety is actually comparison. I see a lot of men who are comparing themselves to what they think they should be like in terms of being in bed or their bodies and how their physical body should look like. Or they're comparing themselves to what they think their ex-partners were like. That's a really big one, where they're scared to have sex with their partners, or they have anxiety of not being good enough in bed because they have an idea that their ex-partners were much better. And it can start with this belief can start from simply a partner. Your partner says something about sex with their ex that's very harmless and meaningless that you take to mean that they're better than you are, or they can do things, they prefer sex with them than you. And, sometimes you really believe that that's what they said. And when you actually have a conversation with them, you'll find out that you've kind of misinterpreted what they said, or you've overemphasized certain things and you've underemphasized certain things. Spoiler alert, what happens a lot, I see, is that a man is with a woman and she says, I used to have this particular type of sex with my ex. That could be sex that's like very kinky or, very risque. And he hears that to mean that she prefers that sex, and he doesn't do that sort of sex, or it's not his sort of go-to. So she's not enjoying sex. When all she was saying was that was the fact of what was happening, right? And she hasn't said that she preferred it at all. And she might have even said she loves the sex she's having with you, and you've just not heard that. That's something I see a lot with men, not really listening to what's being said. But some of the myths. Let's get into the myths. Penis size. It's the biggest myth. Biggest myth around is penis size. You know, we've watched a lot of porn, a lot of us men who've grown up, and if you're anything between basically 18 and 45, you've probably watched a lot of porn on your mobile phone or on your laptop. And what you see in porn is lots of very big penises, and penises aren't that big. I think the average penis erect is like 5.5 inches, maybe a bit smaller. I haven't got exact numbers, but I've got it in one of my workshops, right? And flaccid is down to like 2.5 inches. We have this idea that, you know, bigger is always better. And I can tell a story actually once of a friend of mine, and someone I knew, went to the gym, and he had a very big penis. You could see it in the, you know, when we'd in the gym, we'd shower and afterwards. And he said at times it was an absolute curse, because he goes, women just wouldn't sleep with him. They'd just be like, no, they wouldn't have sex with him. And he said it happened numerous times. And actually he got quite nervous about getting naked with a new woman. He would, because he was scared that would happen and he would feel rejected. So if you're a man and you think, oh, I wish my penis was bigger, like, yes, there's always another side, right? Bigger isn't always better. You know, some women do like big penises, and a lot of women don't. A lot of women prefer a man who is loving and kind and caring and present and aware, right? Those things trump big penis for a mature, intelligent, conscious woman every day of the week. And one of the myths also is around how long sex should last. This idea should go for hours. It can go for hours. I've got some workshops and podcasts that talk about how to have that happen. But actually, like, the average length of time, I think, is about 5 minutes. Intercourse is about 5 minutes. And actually, some of the ways to actually make intercourse longer, I'm going to talk about in the steps to overcome performance anxiety, because sex can really last much longer and it isn't that difficult. Part of it is getting over the anxiety. There's some other bits and pieces in there, but it's nothing groundbreaking, nothing you can't just start to do tomorrow, right? Another myth men have is that they should always be ready for sex, or they should always say yes to sex. This is something me and Cam Fraser touched on in our episode. It's going to be a few episodes back. I don't remember. I don't have a list of podcast episodes in front of me. But it's an episode with Cam Fraser about giving and receiving no's. Is that men feel they always have to be ready for sex. That they can't say no to sex. That's a big one for men, that they can't say no. They always have to be ready, and their libido should be high. And if they don't want sex, there's something wrong with them. And a lot of women feel that way about men. They think they have this misguided idea that if a man doesn't want to have sex, then there's something wrong with her. That's something that comes up a hell of a lot in my coaching. And I've done work with couples around that as well. Removing that, because that's just, again, another story that she's holding in her mind. Next myth is around orgasm ejaculation, right? I think the biggest one here is around the female orgasm, especially internal orgasms. And actually, they're quite rare. I think it's only, I should know these numbers, shouldn't I? It's not as high. It's not that many women have orgasms from internal orgasms. Most of it comes from clitoral stimulation, right? And you know, there's a huge gap, you know, the orgasm gap. We know about the orgasm gap. It's like 98% of men orgasm when they have sex in heterosexual relationships. And I think that falls down to 40%, 60 or 40% when it's women in heterosexual relationships, right? And a huge reason for that gap. There's multiple reasons, but some of them will be taken care of by the advice around overcoming sexual performance, because it's disgraceful, and a lot of it is just down to men don't know how to pleasure the women they're with. Some of it is down to the women don't know how to pleasure themselves, or instruct a man to pleasure them, or communicate and so forth. But to understand that isn't that common, you know, or to understand that having a woman explain to you how to make her come and how to make her orgasm isn't a bad thing. It's actually wonderful. Like, it's one of my preferred ways of having sex is being directed minimum once or twice, because then you're with someone, you know what they like. Yeah, that's something a lot of men don't realize. They think we should know. We think we should know how to do everything, and we don't know how to do everything, and we shouldn't know how to do anything, right? If you're with a new partner, you shouldn't know. Why would you know how to pleasure them? Why would you? You've never been with them before. They may not know how to pleasure you. That's also something that women concern themselves with. I know this because of the work I also do with women. So, 7 steps to overcome your performance anxiety, right? Communicate. The more you communicate about sex, about your fears and anxieties with your partner, the more it will alleviate your performance anxiety. And I know that's the thing you do not want to hear, but it's actually the best thing, right? Clear communication removes misunderstandings, yeah? And it builds a supportive environment, an environment where both people feel safe to talk about their fears, their worries, anxieties with each other, right? And when you create that environment, create an environment inside your sexual experiences with a partner or a lover or someone you're having sex with regularly, where you can talk about these things, you create an environment of vulnerability and connection and safety. And that's probably the thing you want most of all, is safety between the two of you, right? So when you are courageous in that, then you can build it. And it takes courage, right? It takes courage to build that. Another way we can really look at overcoming our sexual performance anxiety is redefining what sex is. We often, mistakenly, look at sex as just penetration. Sex is penetration. But actually to bring in and include things like kissing and touching, other forms of intimacy. That can be the text messages that we send, the flirtation that goes on through the day leading up to maybe having sex in the evening. All these things become part of the repertoire of sex. It means that we're much less likely to go from kind of 0, nothing, just sitting on the sofa, to 100 penetration in a very fast time, right? We have to redefine what sex is to us. And again, not just penetration. And then I guess it comes into the point, the next 2 points touches on this, right? Which is focusing on foreplay as an experience, right? If you want to have better sex and you want to have less anxiety around sex, slow down the sex, which is actually the point afterwards. Slow down all the different stages that you move through, right, of sex. Take your time, right? Slow down. Anxiety builds when we're rushing, right? And like, it's a cyclical thing, because when we're rushing, our anxiety builds as well. So we have to put a stopper in to slow us down, to say, I'm going to slow down. So spending more time in foreplay, spending more time touching and kissing and caressing, right? Bringing teasing and things like that can really be really beneficial, right? In just slowing things down, being with the moment and enjoying the pleasure more than trying to rush to get to the next place. Mindfulness and breathing techniques as well are really helpful. Something that I me and also used to practice a lot together, but also separately, I do breathwork pretty much daily. But also this is something to help reduce anxiety in general, but also something you can do in sex. You can bring in certain breathing techniques, eye gazing with breathing, slow deep breaths as well. Generally, when you're getting into the mood for sex, and even during sex, having your out breath, your exhale, be longer than your inhale will create more ease and relaxation, and more presence. Another thing to really help with your sexual anxiety is self-compassion, is actually paying attention to the negative inner voice that's telling you that you're useless at sex, your penis isn't small enough, you're not pleasuring any women, whatever it may be, right? Whatever that fearful voice is, right? Because there's a voice you can hear. And also, little caveat, that voice isn't who you are. That voice that tells you and is harsh to you, it isn't who you are, right? That's not who you are, and you don't have to listen to that voice. What that voice says isn't the truth, right? Back to self-compassion. Being self-compassionate. If you do come too early, you don't have to berate yourself. We've all done it. I've done it. I did a men's circle once where I asked, I think it was 10, 12 men. I was like, how many have you had premature ejaculation? Like, you've come much faster than you wanted to. Every single man put his hand up, and men looked around in shock when they saw those hands, because they didn't think that was the case. Another thing actually that really helps with anxiety is building an environment in your relationship in your relationship where there's compliments and reassurance that get given. Both you giving compliments and receiving reassurance, right? As it's reciprocal between you and your partner. So when something doesn't go the way you want during sex, like maybe your partner doesn't get wet enough, for instance, or you can't get it up, that actually you support each other in those moments instead of blaming and seeing like what's wrong, or have I done something wrong, or you don't find me attractive. Actually being like, are you okay? It's not a problem. We can do something else. Like, this has happened to me before, don't worry, it's not a big deal. Those sorts of reassuring things go such a long way because you're actually building empathy in those moments instead of creating conflict. Yeah. Some of the physical things you can do for help with your sexual performance anxiety, regular exercise, good diet, clean, healthy foods, good carbs, sweet potatoes, brown rice, that kind of jazz. It does make a big difference, right? Especially if you start to get overweight, keeping your weight down as well could be a massive thing as well that I've seen with men as well. Being healthy, keep the body, the mind healthy. Those things are really, really good. Exercise, like I said, exercise, yoga, flexibility. Often men, we have really tight hips. So some yoga that's like hip opening can be very, very beneficial to getting blood flow to the sexual organs as well. And the last one, experimentation, trying new things, in your sex life so that you're not going through the same routines, and that so both of you find yourself in this state of being the learner or this is new to me, I don't know how to do this. And also coupled with this is bringing a light and playfulness to the sex. Is like, oh, we're doing this new thing. Oh, look, I slipped and I squirted lube in my eye, and actually allow yourself to laugh and smile at it instead of, again, allowing that inner voice to berate and belittle you. I think I'll stop there because ultimately, these are the keys to having good sex in general, right? To be honest. But I think, I'll stop there. I think that's enough for today. What I will tell you is I've got a workshop coming up on the 13th of August at 7:30 p.m. UK time. It's called Overcoming Avoidance, 4 Proven Techniques. Something really for the men out there who can see they can be a bit avoidant, whether that's, as attachment style wise. This is for you. If you're new to the podcast, I've got quite a few episodes around avoidant attachment. It's really the attachment style that I was entrenched in and many of my clients are. And, as you may or may not know, I've just had a baby with my partner of 5 years. So I've really, really left that behind me in many ways. Yeah. So I'm going to take you through some of the tools and techniques that I use myself and I use with my clients to really help them come into secure love and create beautiful, happy relationships. Enough for me today. Share this with someone if they need it. Listen to it with a partner. This is a really good one. If you both or one of you have performance anxiety, listen to this with a partner. It can go a long way to create more connection. Have a wonderful day. Ciao, ciao.